And not only is he hitting home runs, but he also is leading the league in Fangraphs WAR.
Yes, sir, there she goes.
Hello and welcome to episode 123 of Section 138. I'm your host, Mark Colley, as always, joined by Bryson and Jacob. This is a lot better day to be talking about the Blue Jays than it was last time we recorded.
Absolutely, it was. So we had the opening game, a rain delay. The second game which caused a doubleheader yesterday, and we finally saw the MLB debut from yours truly, Alek Manoah, and that was the obviously highlight of yesterday. Despite the second loss in the doubleheader, a lot of good takeaways from the series alone, and the Jays end up winning the series anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, also like considering they came back from being swept by the Rays, losing a series to the Red Sox, it's good to gain some ground on the AL East, and thankfully, I mean, they're done with the East for a little bit, but you know what, it's good to get some ground on it while you could, especially considering that the standings will, I think, start to solidify going into the summer months.
Yeah, this is a point where it starts to, you can actually start to read into what the standings say. Because before, it's like 2 months into the season, it's, 40, 50 games. It doesn't really matter. But at this point, it starts to get, where you can start to actually read into what it says. So let's talk about Alek Manoah, because obviously that was very exciting. 6 innings pitched, 2 hits, 0 runs, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. We all saw the emotion of his family visiting at Yankee Stadium, seeing him strike out the Yankees lineup. It was pretty incredible. The thing that I am most grateful from this start is the fact that A, was a 7-inning doubleheader, and B, the Blue Jays barely used their bullpen at all day. So they had the off day built in with the postponed game on Wednesday, and then going into Thursday, they only use 1 inning of Jordan Romano in game 1 and then 1.1 innings of AJ Cole in game 2. So that's the thing I'm most thankful of from this. Thankful to Robbie Ray, thankful to Alek Manoah for, even though the fact that they lost the second game, they didn't stress the bullpen, which we know was a huge talking point in our last episode.
Yeah, Alek Manoah, Robbie Ray, they were great. Well, I mean, Robbie Ray had a bit of a tougher outing, but if you can get that many innings out of a starter, and especially considering you have 2 less innings to cover, that's perfect. I think Alek Manoah, though, I want to talk about him. He was very impressive. He didn't start off the greatest. I think he walked his first batter, but then he ended up striking out 7 over his 6 innings. 2 walks, no earned runs, as you just said. But the thing that I found most impressive was his actual stuff. And I'm gonna go out and say, when I saw his fastball, it almost reminded me of Jake Arrieta back when he was with the Cubs, because that thing was moving all over the place to the point where it honestly kind of looked like a slider or some other type of pitch. And I think that was extremely impressive. You didn't see a lot of jitters from Alek Manoah. Now, I was watching very hesitantly because I jokingly put $1,000 bet that he would get a no hitter, and that was kind of happening for a bit of time. But I was very, very impressed by him. His stuff was crazy. I mean, in the first inning alone, he forced Aaron Judge to fall to his knees and then struck him out on, I think Judge was expecting a slider, but he got a fastball. So it was kind of like he swung as Reese McGuire had the ball in his glove. So you can tell that even a rookie is fooling elite major league hitters. And it was extremely impressive. I don't know if his parents and his family realized how much they were actually on TV, because it seemed as if every other pitch the broadcast was going over and showing them. But you know what? It was a great moment. It's fun to see more prospects come up. And I think that this is the next piece of the Blue Jays rotation. We talk about how it's been so injured, how they had 2 starters at one point in the season. Now I think they have 4 or 5 legitimate starters. And when you look at with Thomas Hatch hopefully coming back soon, Nate Pearson had a bit of a rough outing a couple days ago or yesterday, but hopefully he comes up soon. And this rotation, I think, looks really solidified. And considering that a lot of these guys are young, it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alek Manoah, I mean, this is exactly what we were all anticipating, and he dominated, all of us. And all of a sudden too, it feels like, for, I guess, a little bit, it kind of just took us away for a bit, maybe saying how much better this rotation actually looks now, as much as it's only been 1 start. And of course, he's got a long way to go as well. But what a debut. And this is exactly what was anticipated. And a lot of us, I think we pretty much all had a similar prediction to his pitching line. And a lot of us were right in certain areas. And a lot of us, I guess, were wrong in a good way, because a lot of us had it. I believe it was, so me and Jacob, or Jacob and I, had 6 hits and Mark had 5. He ended up giving up 2 hits. And of course, the earned runs were 0. Mark and I had 1 earned run, Jacob had 2. And then for the walks, it was around the same, but strikeouts as well, we were all kind of on point with that. So, it was pretty, it went pretty good as we pictured it, or as we planned it beforehand. But yeah, what a debut. He was fired up. His parents were fired up. And it was really good to see him fool the Yankees lineup, because that's exactly what we were all looking for. And it was, like I just mentioned, it was probably one of the most perfect ways it could have ever gotten to start that off in that doubleheader. And maybe that doubleheader did help him a little bit. Mark, I know you mentioned that, of why you thought it was glad it was a doubleheader. And I actually kind of agree. I agree with that to a certain extent, because of the reason, obviously, the 7-inning game and the bullpen usage as well was really low yesterday, which was a very good sign. And it was kind of like a sigh of relief, because for Manoah, you weren't anticipating the bullpen to be used until after the 5th, 6th inning on a regular game. And that all went as planned for a doubleheader. But of course, the 7th-inning game allowed the Jays to use less relievers, and that got them through yesterday's game anyway. And of course, for the second game as well, they didn't use as many relievers as yesterday. So yesterday was a successful split with the doubleheader. They take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. They're back to 1 game over 500, and now they enter another 3-game series to end off a short road trip against Cleveland. And again, this could go pretty good for the Jays. I mean, obviously it's been a better 3 games, and if all goes well with this, then you're heading to Buffalo now on a more positive note and another step forward. So that's why I'm pretty relieved from this 3-game series that they just took on with the Yankees.
Yeah, and just to put the bullpen into numbers, over the entire series, over 4 days, 3 days, they had only 4.2 innings out of the bullpen. That was Jordan Romano, AJ Cole, and then the 2 guys coming out in Tuesday's game. So that's the amount of innings that the Blue Jays were getting from their bullpen in 1 game in the series against Tampa. So it was a huge relief for the bullpen to get this rest, to get the long starts by the starters. I mean, in game 1, we saw Steven Matz go 6.2 innings, only give up 1 run, 10 strikeouts for him, and no walks in that outing. And then, of course, Manoah and Ray. Should Ray have been taken out of the game earlier? I know they, we're trying to put more stress and workload on the pitchers and on the starters for the Blue Jays, but he did give up those runs. He gave up another run in that 5th inning before he was removed from the game. Should the Blue Jays have taken him out earlier and maybe kept them in the game and given them more of a shot, especially, a 1-run deficit is a lot easier to come back from a 2-run deficit? Should Charlie Montoyo have removed Robbie Ray earlier?
I don't actually think so, because here's the thing. Robbie Ray has been a solidified starter, and he's been a cornerstone of this rotation pretty much since he came back. I think he missed 1 start to begin the season, and he's been fantastic since then. Obviously, he had that tough game against the Royals where he walked 6, but then I think he's walked probably 6 since then, 4 yesterday, but I think 2 other than that. But point is Robbie Ray has been very good for the Blue Jays, and he's been very reliable. His stuff wasn't as good yesterday, but I still would have given him the chance, because I think he's earned it this season. Just to, you know what, hey, if you have any more juice left in the tank, then go for it. And that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. If it was somebody else, say worst case, it was Alek Manoah who was getting into a bit of trouble, yes, I would have taken him out, because there's a bit of unproven talent there, and you want to see what you really have. But the Blue Jays know what they have out of Robbie Ray, and I think they trusted that they could at least come back. Obviously, they didn't. They got 3 runs off of a Bo Bichette home run, but that was it. So I don't know if I would have necessarily done it any differently. It just honestly, you win some, you lose some. Robbie Ray was okay, wasn't great, but I still, given his track record this season, I still would have given him a little bit more of a chance.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jacob. I don't know how big of a difference it would have made, just because of the bullpen, I guess, where it currently stands. But yeah, for all those reasons, I agree with you. I think he earned that opportunity to try and get out of the 4th inning, or sorry, get out of the 5th inning. And he ended up obviously 4 2/3, 4 earned runs. So he wasn't as sharp, but he still, I think, did all right. as much as he got the loss yesterday. But yeah, you know what? Second game of the doubleheader as well. I'm just happy the Jays have managed to split it with them, and of course they took the series from the Yankees. But yeah, I don't know. I never really thought about it too much of the Jays going to the bullpen earlier than anticipated, or maybe earlier than some people wanted. But yeah, for those reasons, of the fact that he was just has had a solid year all around. I was happy that they tried to get him out of the fifth inning, and we've seen this all year from, or not all year, but pretty much through, I guess, most of May from this pitching staff, is that they're trying to push these starters to go as deep as they can. And why it hasn't changed, and it didn't change yesterday with Robbie Ray. So that's why it makes sense for me as well to why they kept doing that. But yeah, I wasn't anticipating anything earlier than, unless they, like, when Robbie Ray was pulled, I think it was the right time, and I was happy that he stayed as long as he did. And if they went to the bullpen earlier, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened. I know they went to AJ Cole for an inning and a third, but I mean, what else would have been part of their game plan if they decided to go to the bullpen earlier? That's another question. But yeah, Robbie Ray, I didn't anticipate him being pulled earlier than what he did.
Well, also
Yeah.
he had
I
he had 80 pitches when he came out, so I think say you
Yeah,
pull
he was
him
at 80 pitches.
a couple batters before, that's just I think you could have gotten at least a couple more innings or at least an inning out of him. So that's why, I mean, he only 47 strikes, so not a great ratio there, but point is I think you still need to get as much as you can out of one of your top starters.
Yeah, that's the exact point I was going to make. You're only at 80 pitches. Keep him in. And especially because that fifth inning, it wasn't a bad inning for him. It's not like he was getting like walking guys all over the place, getting a lot of hits and stuff like that and hard contact. No, like the first batter, Tyler Wade, he made a throwing error over to first base. Um, or excuse me, fielding error. And that let Tyler Wade get on, who ended up scoring, but then he struck out DJ LeMahieu. He does walk Gleyber Torres, but it's a wild pitch that gets Tyler Wade to third, and then a sac fly that gets him home. So, like, if he gets the first out of that inning instead of making a fielding error, the Blue Jays are out of that inning with the score still 4-3. So, no, I think keeping Robbie Ray in there is fine, and especially because of his 80 pitches that he was at that point, or less than that at the start of the inning, definitely keep him in that situation. Um, let's talk a little bit about the offense. Number one thing I want to talk about is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Talked about him endlessly, but I mean, he is right now, he's tied for the major league lead in home runs. He used to lead it before, the Blue Jays had a postponed game Wednesday, and then two less innings to play, or four less innings total to play on Thursday. Now he's tied for the major league lead in home runs. But man, like, this kid is ridiculous. The fact that he is coming out there, and not only is he hitting home runs, but he also is leading the league in Fangraphs WAR. He's leading the league in OPS. He's leading the league in times on base. It's insane what he's done this year, and we all know it, but I still can't believe day in and day out everything that he manages to do. It seems like every single at bat he's getting on base or he's doing something productive. It's insane.
Well, yeah, I mean, average still right now it's at 333. On base percentage is almost at 450. Slugging's over 660. OPS is over 1100. Like, this guy is he's ridiculously crazy. And the one thing that's, I think, is impressive to me is in less than 2 months he's at 41 RBIs. And you go back to the 2015 days when the Blue Jays had those three sluggers in the middle of their lineup. All three of them, Bautista, Donaldson, Encarnacion, had around 100 RBIs at the end of the season. And Vladdy is almost at half of that, with only, I think, a third of the season done. So that's extremely impressive. And also, I've seen a lot of people on Instagram and Twitter and whatnot say that this guy is actually going to get some MVP considerations, which, you know what, that would be a pretty interesting thing. Come back from a couple of rough outings or rough seasons to start your career. You come back from that and you're just an absolute monster. So for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he's been everything the Blue Jays have hoped, everything that they've wanted. And I see, the funny thing with me is I'm continuously impressed, but I keep saying to myself, well, it's still early. But then I realize, hold on, it's 2 months into the season. Like, I think this guy is for real. I don't think we can say we still need to see what Vladdy's about. No, I think this is what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is. He's a power hitter. He is going to get on base. He's going to, he's going to help his teammates. He's going to score runs. He's going to drive in runs. And it's just, it's one of those things where I'm supposed to kind of level off and not be as surprised because it's so consistent. But when you think about how consistent it is, that's just even more impressive. So you know what, good for him. And it's helping the team. And it's really making this lineup deeper. And I think that's the best part about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the last time where you've had somebody on this team, I guess, heading into June, not just after 1 month, with an OPS over 1100. It is insane the trajectory he's on right now, and it's maintained. I mean, he's had a few cold spells, and it hasn't even been cold spells. He's gone 0 for 4, 0 for 5, and then the next day he's hitting home runs again anyway. So I mean, it's just been a really, really impressive start for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Obviously, an all-star candidate. You want to look maybe a little bit for future or towards the future of the season. And a lot of people have already saying, I mean, obviously on this pace, he's a legitimate candidate for what at the end of the year. And I know it's still early for that, but as we're heading into almost the halfway part of the season, we're past a quarter. He hasn't stopped. And I mean, right now he's given no signs that it is going to stop. He looks confident at the plate. And as Jacob just mentioned in our text, he's on pace for 52 home runs. That is insane for somebody right now at the end of May. Home runs, 16 RBIs, 41 RBIs. Jacob, you mentioned the RBIs just now, and he's leading this offense to what's been going on all year without George Springer. He's the guy that's been stepping up, and they're still missing that piece. So obviously, other people in the lineup are helping, but Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has been the story all year. He continues to be the story. He had a decent series anyway. This past series with the Yankees, and heading into June, I mean, I would ask you guys, what are you guys expecting? But at this point, there's not even a point in asking that question anymore because it's been the same thing since April and May, and there's been no signs of slowing down. I don't know why anyone would believe that at the point if he would slow down. I mean, is there a chance he still hits better? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but either way, what a season for him. And this is the season he obviously needed it for everyone to finally kind of relax in terms of all of the negativity towards him being overrated, all of this. We know all of the comments that we've had over the past couple of years with him, and it's just been remarkable to say the least of what he's done this year and what he will continue to do as we head into June.
And I would say that he's going to start slumping. Like, ordinarily,
Exactly.
looking at a guy like this, you don't think he's going to continue this pace for an entire season, but we've kind of already seen what he's like when he's slumping this year. Like, he went, 0 for 9? And that was it. Like, if that's his worst this season, I mean, it's ridiculous. This kid is ridiculous. And I just want to read through some of the leaderboards because it it boggles my mind. Like, this is going by Baseball Reference WAR, so he's not quite at the top like he is in Fangraphs WAR, but he's seventh among all players in WAR. He is third among position players, first in offensive WAR. He is in batting average. He's fifth in on base percentage. He's second in slugging. He's second in OPS. He's first in games played. He is not on the leaderboard, but he's played all the games Blue Jays have played. It's just ridiculous. Runs scored, he's fourth. Hits, he's fifth. Total bases, he's first. The list goes on and on. Home runs, of course, tied for first. Runs batted in, he's tied for third. Walks, he's tied for eighth. To have someone in the top 10 for all these different stats, it's just incredible. And another guy I want to talk about, two other guys I want to talk about offensively, is Marcus Semien and Bo Bichette. And we saw them go back to back in the first game of yesterday's doubleheader, and that was with the only runs that the Blue Jays scored. But both of those guys, Semien has been producing for a while. He's staying hot. But Bo Bichette, I think we know this is someone who runs very hot and pretty cold. But with the 2 home runs yesterday in the doubleheader and both ends of the doubleheader, we could be seeing him heat up a little bit. And we already know how good this offense is and how good it can be. But adding Bo Bichette at his, peak hot rate could make this lineup just that much deeper.
Yeah, Bo Bichette, he is actually really starting to come around. And I think it was before the game, there was like an interview with him where he said he's not really felt the best all season. So even he's, I think, still a little disappointed with himself. And he's still hitting above average, above major league average. And that is just,
Yeah, he's
see
got a
that,
123 OPS
yeah,
plus.
like to see a guy still want better. I think that just shows just how much that this Blue Jays team and is really encouraging everybody to do better, but also him himself. He's a lot of credit to Bo Bichette. He's a very talented player. But him, he started off a little bit slow. And when I say started off slow, I'm talking about like the first couple games of the season, but consistently he's been around 300. He was above 300 for a few times earlier on in the season, but now he's up at 270 or 272 actually, slugging 495, on base percentage is over 300. So for him, he's getting on base. He's a typical top of the order guy, but he's also hitting home runs. 11 home runs. I mentioned a couple, I think it was probably a month ago, he's at like a 42 home run pace. I'm not sure how, actually, I think that might still be accurate just looking at his games played. So he like this is, I think, another George Springer at the top of your lineup where you have a guy that can get on base, but you also have a guy that could hit for power, and he's going to play every day. And honestly, like if I'm Cleveland, I know that that's who the Blue Jays are playing right now. I'm nervous to face this team. Honestly, like I don't want to necessarily sound like a cocky fan, but this offense is just it's crazy. And if it's not Vladdy, it's Bo. If it's not Bo, it's George Springer when he comes back. And like this lineup, there's so many guys that you could trust to get you out, and even the guys that kind of that weren't doing as well, or we kind of had different projections for them. Randall Grichuk came back, and he's been great all season long. And if you're Charlie Montoyo, yes, the bullpen's been a nightmare to manage. The rotation's been tough with injuries, but you're counting your lucky stars and you're really thanking the baseball gods that this offense has just been so good for you. And it's because of all these individual performances that it gels together to create one lethal offense. And I can't say enough about Bo Bichette. The one thing that's tough is I don't know whose jersey to get. I don't know if it's him or Vladdy or Springer, because there's so many good players. But point is I'm happy with this offense, and I'm in awe every day watching these guys because they're so young too. Like Bo Bichette, I think has played just over 162 games or something like that off the top of my head. Like he's not played a lot, but he's already such a mature hitter, and it's encouraging, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's such an exciting lineup. And for Marcus Semien, I mean, we go back to the days, maybe I guess middle of April to the end of April, where everyone was freaking out of him at the top of the lineup, how this and that, he's not hitting well, this and that. And then of course the Jays make the change, they drop him to the middle of the order. I know he's leading off right now again, but that's obviously because he's hitting well. And either way, the best thing that happened to him was probably that drop in the lineup. And all of a sudden he began to heat up. And this contract, or this 1-year deal that the Jays have him on, is starting to look like a little bit of a steal based on what we saw, based off of his results in 2019, where he was a finalist for the AL MVP, and his down year in 2020, but the recovery in 2021, he's putting up very impressive numbers. And that's why it looks like a steal. And the Jays have him right now leading off. And when George Springer's back, he'd probably, I would say, maybe go back down to the middle of the order. I wouldn't be surprised he stays at the top, but either way, the Jays can get flexible with that. But yeah, I mean, his OPS is 900, and it's insane just because of the start he did have. And, he's getting on base, he's hitting home runs. And like Jacob, you said, if it's not Bo, it's him. And a lot of guys are stepping up, and that just shows how deep this lineup can be. And for Bo Bichette as well, he's definitely been a little bit of a streaky hitter this year, maybe a little bit more than what we were used to in 2020. And I know in 2019, he obviously didn't play too long, a little bit, or for half of the season when he was called up. But I just feel like this is the year that he was maybe the most streaky out of all. But either way, maybe he still has improvements to make, and maybe he could be better than what he has been. But the results still show that he's had a really good year either way. So that's why I'm pretty relieved from that. And I mean, if he's hitting like that now, and if he gets on a really good hot streak where he's not as streaky as he has been this year, there's definitely room for improvement for those numbers, which makes this lineup very scary. And another guy that I wanted to bring up, it just feels like we haven't spoken about him as much this year. And maybe that's because he's kind of under the shadow of Guerrero, Semien, Bichette, was Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, what a comeback that he has made ever since coming back from the COVID IL. We know that he kind of had that slow week, but of course it was a week. So, I mean, pretty empty numbers. He comes back from the COVID IL. And ever since then, he has been on fire. He's another guy with an 870 OPS and a batting average over 300. That's impressive. A slugging percentage over 500. This guy was a key part to the lineup last year. And maybe because of all these additions and all, the breakout from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and I guess Marcus Semien coming over, he's been a little bit undershadowed a bit, but I don't think he cares too much. I mean, obviously it takes pressure off of him. And that's the one guy. He's been solid this year in the cleanup spot. And I'm sure he'll continue to play well, but that's another trade where you look back now when the Jays got Teoscar Hernandez. And of course, he did have a little bit of a slow 2019. And a lot of people were wondering if this trade was really going to pan out. And I mean, based off last year and this year, this trade definitely almost seemed like it was almost a steal. But what a deal that the Jays did make for Teoscar Hernandez. And he's just somebody that I wanted to shout out because I feel like we haven't spoken about him as much. But I mean, that's not our fault. But either way, just because of how deep this lineup is, he's another one that has been a very key part to this offense. But yeah, Guerrero, Bichette, Bo, Semien, and of course, when Springer's back, I mean, this team's only going to get better. And I mean, obviously, we're coming off one of the worst week of the season last week. This is why this series against New York was kind of a little bit of everyone calming down a little bit. And then, of course, hopefully it can stay that way throughout the weekend. Of course, we don't really know, but either way, Cleveland's also had a decent start to the year based on where they sit currently in the AL Central. I believe they are first, and if they're not in first, they're in second. I know they're at the top of the AL Central as of now, so that's why it'll definitely be a tough series this weekend, but it's also going to be a good one. And if the Jays can come back to Buffalo, maybe winning another series against Cleveland, that's going to be an absolute win. And heading into Buffalo with a good pace of momentum is going to be very important for them as they try and make that run now after a bad.
Yeah, and just go back to Marcus Semien. He is 6th in all of baseball in F4. So to have two guys in the top 6 in baseball, and those are your 1 and 3 hitters, I mean, that's remarkable. And then on Teoscar Hernandez, I don't think we're talking as much about him just because he hasn't been doing this for as long. I don't think because, we mentioned he did have the rough April. He only played, I think it was 8 games in April because he was hit with COVID and he had a family member who had COVID. He got COVID. So I think that's why we're not talking about him as much. But I mean, it's crazy. Like in 8 games in April, he had a 235 batting average, same on base percentage because he didn't walk at all. And then he has an OPS of 647. And then you go to May and he has a batting average of 340, on base of 407, slugging of 536, and OPS of 943. So it's just crazy how much he has turned it around. And one thing I want to ask you guys about, obviously, we know the Blue Jays are done in Dunedin. The series against the Rays was the last series there. And unfortunately, it didn't go the way the Blue Jays wanted it to go, of course, but that was the last series there. Now they're moving to Buffalo. You look at some of the home and away splits for these guys, like Teoscar Hernandez, just talking about him. At home, he has a 533 slugging, away 479. You look at Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette is one of the most extreme home and away splits of any Blue Jays, but he has an OPS of 930 in home games and an OPS of 719 on the road. And then you go to Vladdy as well, who has extreme splits the same way. You have a home OPS of 1.418, 1.418, and then an away OPS of 0.854. So we're seeing big differences in terms of home OPS and away OPS. And the offense that the Blue Jays have been putting up in Dunedin is, of course, a lot higher than it has been on the road. And a lot of people are saying it's practically Coors Field to be playing at, just the way the wind carries balls out of there, the way offensive productions for both teams when they play there is a lot higher. Now that they're moving to Buffalo, is it a concern that the offense might be on a downward trend a little bit?
I think we have to see that before we get concerned, to be completely honest, because the offense wasn't bad last season in Buffalo, and it's not been terrible this season also. So I would say we have to wait a little bit to really get a grip on what the offense looks like in Buffalo, but also I think there's a bit of a extra motivation there because there's fans now in Buffalo, whether you're vaccinated or not. Like there's obviously restrictions, but there are fans able to go into the game, and that's going to be very exciting. So if I'm any of these players who the stats would say perform better at home, that's even more of a reason to do a little bit better. So for me, I'm optimistic. I think I'm not necessarily willing to say they will regress. I mean, obviously, over a full season, guys, I think will regress from over a 300 average, but I don't know if we can necessarily say that that's the case yet. I think all the projections we have for the players are positive until they start to regress, because with as you just mentioned, Mark, all the stats prove that these guys are usually better at home. Now they're going to the home that they knew last year. They're going to be fans there. They're over 500. I mean, it's early on, or relatively early on into the season, but you're entering the summer in a playoff race. So for me, if I'm any of these players, I'm saying, hey, this is a way to improve and really get, not necessarily run away with the playoff position and absolutely destroy the baseball, but it's a way to say, let's at least do the best that we can with these circumstances. And that's, I think, the most impressive part to me is this team's really uh, they're banding together, I think. But yeah, I'm not necessarily willing to say that the offense will regress. I think it'll either stay the same or it'll get better, just considering the circumstances.
And yeah, to your point, Jacob, they're actually expanding capacity at Salem Field once again. I think it's going to be around 60%. So hopefully that feels more comfortable for the Jays. They can kind of feel more comfortable playing at home, because we know obviously when they were in Dunedin, it wasn't exactly the case. And a lot of the players are kind of happy to get out of there as much as they were hitting the ball well. But yeah, going back to Buffalo, Mark, there's a reason why I'm not concerned, and I managed to pull up the splits from last year when they were in Buffalo, and a lot of these guys did end up hitting well in Buffalo. And one guy in particular who hasn't obviously played that well this year, and somebody who was really well or did really good in Buffalo, maybe this could kind of help him, was Rowdy Tellez. I think we mentioned it before, but in 10 home games at Buffalo last year, he had an OPS over 1100. I know the games are small, but either way, that was obviously a shortened season last year, which is why I'll still read them. So Rowdy Tellez, OPS over 1100. Bo Bichette, OPS over 900. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., as much as he was up and down last year, he also had a really good OPS. It was at 945. Danny Jansen also had a good OPS. Randall Grichuk. So a lot of these guys were playing really well in Buffalo last year. Cam Biggio, Teoscar Hernandez, Gurriel, all these guys managed to hit the ball well in Buffalo. So maybe as long as they can translate their 2020 performance to how they did this year in terms of where they were in Dunedin, that's why I'm not too concerned. And I think that this is definitely an opportunity for them to continue to hit the ball well. And if maybe they hit it better, and of course you get the advantage of now more of a home atmosphere in Buffalo. So that's why I'm not too concerned, but of course we all have to believe it when we see it, which goes to your point, Jacob. But based off these splits from last year, it's not like they were horrible. And this is why I'm kind of showing some optimism for that move to Buffalo now. But of course, you never know, right? It could be empty numbers comparing last year to this year. And I completely understand if people disagree with that or don't even really want to look at 2020 numbers. And I guess there's definitely a chance that it just doesn't translate to what it was last year. And I mean, obviously none of us know, but based off of those splits, I'm going to be optimistic for it. And especially for someone like George Springer, who's also going to be hitting in Salem Field, I'm not concerned at all. And as of now, I think that they're going to still manage to hit well in Buffalo for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as much as it might hurt the hitters, if it does, to your point, Bryson, it doesn't seem like it will. They had good offensive numbers there last year. It's going to help the pitchers as well. Like, every home field
100%.
disadvantage for one side of the ball is a home field advantage for the other. And I think we saw that in TD Ballpark in Dunedin. It seemed like any ball hit into the air got caught in that jet stream and it went out, no matter what part of the ballpark it was to, what inning it was, what time of day, how hard it was hit. It seemed like everything in the air would just float over that wall. And that obviously hurt the pitchers. How many games? Like the last game that we saw in Dunedin, 14-8 for the Rays. Like, that's the type of offensive production that hurts the pitching. If that goes down in Buffalo, it's going to help the pitching. It might hurt the offense, but it's going to help the pitching. So, yeah, I'm not too concerned about it. And, to the numbers that you just brought up, Bryson, doesn't seem like it'll be a big deal. All right. Well, we'll wrap up our podcast there. Thank you to everyone who listened to this episode. It was a lot more cheerful than our last episode because, of course, Blue Jays going 2-3. Hopefully, they can keep it up and continue this brief hot streak in the series in Cleveland, and then after that as we head into June. But until then, you can follow us on social media at Section 138 Pod. We're on Instagram and Twitter. You can support our Patreon at patreon.com/Section 138 Pod. You can find us on YouTube and watch all our episodes and see the occasional live stream there. And then lastly, you can just rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Help spread the word about what we're doing here. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.